Backstage with Mothership on Solid Rock Radio begins now. Hear the best in new music, artist interviews, stories from the road, and more. You are now backstage, and here's your host, Mothership.
Hey everybody, my friend Tony Nasrallah is the owner of one of the hottest venues in Florida, and that's saying a lot. Murray Hill Theaters in Jacksonville. It's the place to go for faith-based and positive concerts and events. In August, they're going to have their 30th anniversary concert series, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But let's first talk about the man behind Murray Hill. His testimony is the story of tragedy and hope. Tony, share your story.
I guess the important part starts when I was 20 years old and a friend of mine shared the gospel with me. And I had been raised in a family that went to church and went to Sunday school as a child. I went to my family attended a Presbyterian church, and I felt like the Presbyterians did a pretty good job of teaching children and teaching me the tenets of the faith. And to be honest, everything that they taught me, I accepted and I believed, but I was learning facts just like I was in school learning history. So all the stuff I learned about Jesus, his life and death and resurrection, I believe that is history, and I gained some head knowledge as a child in elementary school, but it really didn't affect my life in any way. I never asked Jesus into my life as a child. And I went through confirmation in the 6th grade. That's what we do in the Presbyterian church. They ask me all the questions, and you get all the answers right, and you're confirmed as a member of the church. And as soon as I went through confirmation, though, I also started, that was when I was in 6th grade, I started mowing lawns. And Sunday morning was a prime lawn mowing time. So right after confirmation, I asked my parents if I could, instead of going to church, if I could use that as some work time. And some reason they agreed. So instead of going to church on Sunday mornings, I was mowing lawns on the weekends to make money. And then from there, I just started hanging out with the wrong crowd and just kind of went down a path of just stupid punk kids. I was a typical middle school rebellious, I just say hellraiser, pot smoker, just hung out with these punk kids. And that was kind of my lifestyle all through middle school and high school. And it wasn't until I was 20 that a friend of mine shared a gospel message that I could ask Jesus into my life and he could change my life. And I told this friend, I said, I know all about that. I'm good with God. I don't, I'm happy where I am. But it was about a week later, I guess, in my bedroom all by myself. For some reason, the words of that gospel presentation came back to me, and the Lord reminded me of some things in my life that he had seen me through and was with me. And I just felt like that night in my bedroom all by myself that God was calling me to himself. So as a 20-year-old, I just asked Jesus into my life. I said, yes, Lord, I just felt like he was wanting me to ask him, and I did that and woke up the next morning, and I felt like I was a new person. I told my parents that, hey, I'm a Christian now, and they said, well, what do you mean? You were baptized as a baby? You went through confirmation? And I said, well, there's something different now. I have the Lord in my life now, and that started the great adventure, as Stephen Curtis Chapman put it. I believe that he's the one who sang that song, The Great Adventure. And one of the things I found, though, as a new believer, is I knew there was a bunch of things in my life that I needed to either set down or control, because and one of those things was drinking. And I don't really believe I was a full-fledged alcoholic, but whenever I got around my friends and whenever we did anything social, it involved drinking. And whenever it involved a little bit of drinking, then that turned into it always turned into too much drinking. So as a believer, what I thought I could do is go back to my friends and hang out at the bars with them, and I could just have a beer with them and tell them about my newfound faith. But I had zero self-control, and whenever I did that, always, when one beer would turn into 2, which would turn into 3, and would often turn into shots. And just so many nights I would go home realizing that I wasn't a good witness, and I didn't have any self-control. I didn't mean to drink that much, and I just realized, you know what, I need to stop hanging out at those old places that I used to hang out with my old friends, and stop hanging out at the bar. So I was trying to find some place that I could go, that I could have fun, but didn't have that atmosphere. So I was looking for some place that didn't even serve, and there weren't a lot of places, but somebody told me about a little kind of a leftover from the 60s coffee house, and this was in 1982. I was 20 years old, and there was a little kind of a coffee house venue in Jacksonville, and every Friday night this coffee house would invite a Christian rock band to come play, and it probably had a capacity of about 50 maybe. But that introduced me to Christian music. I wasn't familiar with Christian music, but I started hearing these local Christian rock bands, and what I found at this little coffee house is there was a bunch of young adults just like me that were all kind of struggling to walk the straight and narrow, and we just did it in community. that was the Friday night hangout. And then the people that I met on Friday nights were the people I started hanging out on Saturday nights. And most of the people there were young believers, and it was just a godsend to me. So I ended up going to this little coffee house pretty much every Friday night for about 2 years. And then after that, I decided I was going to go off to college. So I went off to college, and after college, I got married, moved to Chicago, worked for a couple of years, had a couple of kids, and then decided to move back home to Jacksonville. So when I came back to Jacksonville, by then it was 1987, and when I got to Jacksonville, I thought, even though I was married and had a couple kids, I thought, I'm going to find out if that coffee house is still doing shows or doing stuff. So when I drove by it, I found out not only were they not doing shows, but the building had been torn down and they'd put a new shopping center right on top of where it was. So in 1987, and of course, me just having come back to Jacksonville after being gone for a few years, I just saw that place was gone, and I had a fleeting thought, and the thought was simply, man, that's too bad that place is gone. That was pretty cool. Somebody ought to do something like that. And I just had that fleeting thought. And the things that really struck me about this little coffee house was that it was an alcohol-free establishment and that it had live music. And those are the two things that were a huge blessing to me. And also the people that ran it were Christians, and they ran it as an outreach. While it was a cool coffee house, it had a distinct mission of being a place where God's love would be shared. And they always did it in a relational way. It was just a cool hangout place. And so, with that place gone, I just thought, I don't know, I really didn't think I would do it. I just thought somebody ought to do it. And it was months later in 1987, after I moved back to Jacksonville. My wife was from Boise, Idaho, out west, and we ended up in Jacksonville, Florida. So we decided that my wife needed to go visit her parents because it had been a while, and I had just started a new job and didn't really have a lot of time off. So we decided that my wife and our two young sons would fly out to Boise a couple of weeks before Thanksgiving, and then I would fly out the day before, maybe a day or two before Thanksgiving, and join them. But they were flying from Jacksonville to Boise, Idaho. I went to the airport and put them on the plane, and they were supposed to connect through Denver, Colorado. And the connecting flight in Denver, as the airplane was taking off, there was a severe snowstorm, and the airplane had de-iced its wings but waited too long to take off after the de-icing. And as the plane was taking off at the edge of the airport, right after it left the ground, one of the wings became non-aerodynamic, I guess you would say, and the airplane actually flipped over and ended upside down. And in that plane crash, there were 28 people that died in that plane crash. And while my wife barely survived, our two young children died in that crash, and they were 6 months and 2.5 years old. And that was November 15th, 1987, so it's been, almost 40 years ago, not quite, but still a tender spot. But for me, having to, hear about this accident, finding out that the plane that crashed was the plane that my family was supposed to be on, not knowing if they were on there, having to figure out what was going on, nobody knowing anything. I ended up having to travel to Denver to get any answers because nobody knew what happened. And when I got to Denver, I actually had to go to the morgue to identify my children. They were not identified, and then I had to figure out where my wife was, and they said that they had 3 different ladies in different hospitals that were all Jane Does. They were unidentified, and they weren't sure which one was my wife. And I had to go to, after identifying my children in the morgue, which was just excruciatingly painful, traumatic experience. Had to then go identify my wife. And when I first saw my wife in that hospital bed, I didn't even recognize her. They had estimated that she was a 50-year-old lady because she was just so bloated and beat up and swollen. But she was 22 and unrecognizable and had a severe head injury. And because of that, they had shaved all her hair off, so she didn't have any hair, and she was scraped up and tubes coming out of everywhere. And just it took me quite a while to say, to positively identify that was my wife. It wasn't until they brought her wedding rings and things like that, her personal effects. By now, it was the next day after the accident. They said, we were surprised that she lived the night, and we don't expect her to live another night with all the severe injuries. And I was on the 8th floor of the University Hospital in Denver, Colorado, having just identified my children in the morgue, and my wife, that seemed like she was going to imminently pass. She was in a coma, unresponsive, with all sorts of vital signs that were weak. And my thought was, I'm just going to jump out the window, the 8th floor window. So I started sizing up different pieces of furniture and trying to figure out how to do it and when I was going to do it. And in that moment, I don't even know if it was a moment, but throughout that whole course, even though my mind and my body were starting to just really unravel, and I don't even know how to describe it, but I could start feeling the presence of the living God inside me, holding me. And again, my mind was saying, I just want to go be with my kids. And my body was starting to have a reaction. It was just such a, I don't even know how to say it, such a traumatic time. But in the midst of that, in the midst of me not even being able to barely stand, and I wasn't being stoic, I wasn't being strong, I was a mess. But I could feel God holding me. And I felt like I heard God say, just pray for her, just be with your wife, stay with her and pray with her, pray for her, just be by her side, thinking that she would pass, and she didn't pass away. She survived the night, and I just stayed there next to her, and she remained in a coma for, I don't know, maybe 10 days, and then slowly started coming out of the coma. But she, praise the Lord that she didn't pass. The doctors at one time said that if she survived, they suspected she would not live a normal life because of the parts of the brain that were injured, and it was just grueling. But God got me through that, and slowly over time, she came out of the coma. She had a very long recovery, and to this day, if you met my wife, and maybe you have met her, I'm not sure, but people that meet her don't know that she had been through such a traumatic accident or had such a major head injury. She's been healed. It took years, literally years of rehabilitation. But all her intellect came back. She's a gifted musician, and all her music came back. She's a viola player and a piano player. And just that story of her being healed, even though I was pretty mentally and emotionally and even spiritually screwed up. And I physically, obviously, I wasn't hurt. I wasn't on the plane, but God was holding me the whole time, and He was walking me through it, and He was holding my wife, and I credit the fact that I'm here talking about it, and that my wife is alive and well. Is I believe that hers was a physical miracle healing, that the Lord brought healing to her mind and her body, and brought her into a full recovery. And through the years, God brought back wholeness and healing in my life. And I just know that even though both my wife and I were strong believers at the time of the accident, it was just so difficult, such a tough time that I was at the end of myself. But that's where the Spirit of the living God was there holding me and walking me through it. So I just want to give all the honor and glory and credit to the Lord for just seeing me through that time. And then they were concerned if she would be able to carry children, and she was able to. So the Lord blessed us with 2 more children that are the same age apart as the first 2 that we lost. So we have 4 boys, and 2 are with the Lord, and the other 2, one's 35 years old and lives here in Jacksonville, and the other's 32 years old and lives in Portland, Oregon. And just what a blessing that God restored my wife, restored me, and restored my family. And again, I don't even know how to put it into words. It was several years after the accident that I was just realizing just the significance of the healing that God brought into my life and in my wife's life, and blessing us with the 2 children. And I was actually at a church retreat. This was in 1993, so it was about 5 years after the accident. And at this church retreat, I was just seeking the Lord. And in the middle of seeking the Lord, the thought of that little coffee shop that ministered to me as a 20-year-old had gone so far in the back of my mind that I wasn't even thinking about it. But at this church retreat, I felt like I heard the Lord say, remember that coffee shop that ministered to you so much as a young man, and how you thought somebody ought to do something like that? I felt like I heard God say, I think you should do something like that. So I came away from the retreat and told the group I was with that, hey, I think God's calling me to do this, some kind of ministry that provides Christian music without alcohol. And there was something like that really helped me as a young man. And I said, I felt like God wants me to do something like that. So I started telling people some of the vision of what I think God wanted me to do. And to have some kind of music venue with no alcohol, Christian bands. And most of my friends thought, now during this whole, after the accident, when I was struggling to recover, the doctors had diagnosed me as having PTSD. And I had good doctors and had to rely on medicine for a while, but the Lord healed me from all that, and I believe I'm healed from that. I don't believe I have PTSD anymore, but they thought I was having some kind of flashback when I started telling them that I wanted to try to recreate this venue that helped me out as a young man, as a 20-year-old.
So they were trying to tell you were crazy?
You want to do what? So I started looking around and trying to find a place where I could do something like that. I had no idea where to start or how to do it, and so I started asking a lot of people and getting advice from a lot of people and seeking wise counsel and telling people kind of what I was looking for. And so there was lots of people that had it on their mind, and somebody had told me that this old building, the old Murray Hill Theater building, which was a movie theater I used to go to as a kid, it was built in 1947, and that actually they finished it in 1948, but the Murray Hill Theater that showed movies from 1948 until 1993 had stopped showing movies because the neighborhood it was in had gotten very rough, and the neighborhood was so rough nobody really wanted to go to a movie there. So now this movie theater was sitting empty, dark, and dilapidated, and it was for sale. And there was actually a church pastor that had his eye on it and thought that would be a cool place for a church, and he had heard that I was looking for a music venue, so he said, hey, maybe we can work together and acquire this building and have a place to do, concerts on Friday and Saturday nights, and we could hold our church there on Sunday. And after praying about it, I just felt like that was the direction the Lord had for us. So now I started telling people that not only do I want to do a music venue that doesn't have a bar, that doesn't serve alcohol, and brings in Christian music, but I want to do it in this old dilapidated building in a very rough part of town at the time. And then they said, well, now we know we're crazy. Maybe you can do it somewhere, but at the Murray Hill, nobody's going to want to go to the Murray Hill Theater. And especially if you want to focus on, youth and young adults. And it's, they were very discouraging. But as I've said to many people, I didn't really know if I moved forward with this, if it would last 6 months or 6 years, but I just felt like out of obedience, I wanted to give it a shot. And now 30 years later, we've been doing shows there just about every weekend for the past 30 years, and it's had a tremendous impact on the neighborhood. So now the neighborhood is one of the hottest neighborhoods in Jacksonville, which was slow. It was a long process. And the building has been, even though it was needed a ton of work, and it still needs a ton of work 30 years later.
It's sort of a work in progress, right?
It is. And there's always something that needs to be fixed up or, that needs to be replaced. So, yeah, God's been using it for 30 years. I'm not sure how to say this. I guess I'm not surprised that the theater's still doing shows. I guess I'm surprised that I'm still hanging out there helping with it. So, one of the ways that everybody was like, how are you gonna make money? Because if it's just Christian music, there's going to be so many people that don't want to go. And if it doesn't have a bar, that's, most music venues make a significant amount of the revenue from the bar sales. And so when I started it, I did start it as a nonprofit organization, and I started it as with all volunteers. So running the Murray Hill Theater isn't my job. I've been involved in real estate for many years, so I'm a volunteer there. And even though now there is a small part-time paid staff, and there has been in the past, but for the most part, everybody that helps out at the theater, including myself, are all volunteers. So the fact that I'm still volunteering 30 years later,
you wonder about that.
I wonder about that. What am I doing still hanging out there? I'm an old guy now. When I started it, I was 33, and now I'm 63. So it's anyway, but
Wow. And I've had the honor of volunteer serving at the Murray Hill Theater several times.
Yes, and I just want to commend you for the ministry of hospitality you have to the bands, and that ministry of feeding them, and especially your banana pudding, but all the food that you bring. So awesome. I've always admired you for how much of a blessing you are to the bands, and not just the meals. You're awesome the way you minister and love on all the bands.
Well, I love serving, and I love serving at Murray Hill. It's always a blessing to be at the theater.
Yes.
Well, let's talk about this 30th anniversary coming up. Over those years, you've hosted so many legendary bands. Tell us about your special month of August to commemorate this anniversary.
For our 20th anniversary, we basically did a weekend festival, and that was really cool. It was a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and it just went really well. And then we were planning our 25th anniversary bash, and that's when COVID hit. That put the kibosh on it. So we didn't do anything for our 25th year. And this year, I'm not sure why, but I just felt like, hey, instead of doing a weekend festival, why don't we do a series of concerts? And So I came up with this idea. What I'm saying is in August, which our first event was on August 11th in 1995. So I figured August was our anniversary month, that we would bring in 30 bands in 30 days to celebrate 30 years. So, but we're not doing one concert every day for the 30 days in August, even though there's 31 days in August. But we're going to do basically every Friday and Saturday night in August. We plan on bringing in a band that is either sold out or done really well in the past, some legacy bands, and we just thought, let's just have a whole concert series and celebrate every weekend in August instead of just a festival. So it's been a lot of work the last 6 or 8 weeks trying to book that many bands and for August, but we finally got the lineup, and we're just now getting the word out. I encourage people to go to murrayhilltheater.com where you can see all the shows that we have. But you want me to run through the lineup real quick?
Yeah, let's do that.
So first of all, the night before on July 31st, there's a worship leader in Jacksonville, a young man named Gabriel Storm. He just does an awesome job of worship, and he's real popular on I think TikTok and Instagram and stuff. So Gabriel Storm's going to open us up with a night of worship, a free night of worship on Thursday, July 31st. And he's a local guy that's played worship nights in the past, but we're excited about that. And then on August 1st, we're bringing in Tripoli, Aaron Cole, and KJ52. And those are all artists that have played multiple times at the theater and done really well. So I think that's going to be a fun lineup on August 1st. August 2nd, we're actually kind of just having an open house. It's free. We're going to have a couple local bands playing. It's just going to be hanging out, meet and greet, talk about the theater, kind of a happy birthday to Murray Hill on August 2nd. And then August 8th, we're bringing back a band called 10th Avenue North.
Wait, there's one on August 3rd?
Oh, yeah, August 3rd, we're having Allison Ide and Jude Smith. Thank you. I forgot about that one. That's a Sunday night. And that one we kind of squeezed in at the last minute. They're not legacy bands. They were just touring through and said, hey, can we play in the middle of your 30th anniversary series? And we said, sure, hop on board.
Oh, they snuck in, didn't they?
So, yeah, but they're part of the series. 10th Avenue North on August 8th, and they were a band out of Palm Beach, Atlantic, and they used to come up to Jacksonville all the time and play at the theater when nobody had ever heard of them. But they had a pretty good following in Jacksonville, so we have a long history with 10th Avenue North. And then August 9th is my favorite guitar player in Nashville, Phil Keggy. His music really ministered to me as a young believer in the early 80s, and I've just always been a big fan of Phil Keggy, and his music also ministered to me as I went through my tragedy with my sons and that accident. There was quite a bit of Christian music that was really therapeutic for me, and some of his music just ministered to me during those years of recovery from that accident. So Phil Keggy, just glad to have him. He's sold out a few times. He's come to the Murray Hill Theater. And then the following weekend, August 15 and 16, is going to be a huge weekend. We're bringing back Five Iron Frenzy, Goaty Hook. Both of those bands played so many times, and whenever Five Iron would come, they would always crash at my house, no matter who they were with. And whenever they came, they always had a really cool lineup with them. And usually there was 3 or 4 bands with about 15 or 20 people, and they would come stay at the house afterwards. And Goaty Hook is one of those punk bands that just played a bunch in the early 90s and 2000s. So having them come back together, quite a cool thing. The next night we're having Bleach. Bleach is another one of those bands that did really well through the years and played many times, and they're playing with Keep Warm and the Easy Button. August 22nd, oh, this would be a cool one. 1K Few with Grits and Petty D, No Diverves, and some others. But on Goatee Records, Grits was the first national band that we did at the Murray Hill Theater, because the first 6 years of operation, we just had local and regional bands. We didn't have a signed band with an agent. It was just me talking to different bands and bringing them in. So Grits was the first national act we ever did at the Murray Hill Theater, and they ended up coming back several times.
What a great band.
Yeah. So Petty D, he was a local guy that played at the theater all the time, and when he signed his record deal, he did his first video at the theater. So long history with Petty D and having 1K Few as a headliner. And then the next night, August 23rd, we're doing our hardcore night with Impending Doom, with Blood Comes Cleansing. Yes, a couple other bands. Identify the Body and
Cleansing of the Temple.
Yeah, and Cleansing of the Temple. Thank you. So yeah, that'll be our heavier night, obviously. And then the following weekend we have a Rare Breed, and Rare Breed is he calls his music God Twang. He's kind of a mix of country and hip hop, and the last time he played did really great, really packed out the theater. So we're bringing Rare Breed back. And then on August 30th, it is the the touring band that has played more times than any other touring band in the history of the Murray Hill Theater, and that's our friends Disciple. So Disciple is coming back for the final show of our 30th anniversary concert series. Disciple will be playing with a couple of local favorites that open for them just about every time they come, Khalil and Tricord. To be able to bring Disciple back as a part of this series is just kind of the icing on the cake. So that's going to cap it off. So throughout the whole month, there's actually 30 plus bands and 30 plus days to celebrate 30 years.
Fantastic.
Yeah, we do encourage people. It's a perfect time to come to Florida.
I say pick a weekend or two and plan a vacation. Murray Hill Theater is about 30 minutes from Jacksonville Beach. It's perfect.
A lot of people do that. Yep.
What's the vision for the future of Murray Hill Theater?
Well, mostly just to keep it going and keep it going strong. And so part of the vision is, find additional both volunteer and part-time paid staff. I think I'm at the point where after this, I might want to hand it off. Kind of handed it off a few times to some younger generations, but
Can't stay away. Come on, Tony.
right. Well, maybe I'll show up, right when the show starts and leave right when the show's over, and not have to be the first one to get there and the last one to leave, like I've done for years. But we want to keep it going. We want to continue to use it as a place where artists can just exercise their gifts for the Lord, and we love having new bands that nobody's ever heard of, and those are some of the bands that in the early '90s that we brought in. Switchfoot, POD, when those guys first started playing. Nobody had heard of them. They'd come play at the theater, come crash at the house afterwards. And so we want to keep it going with the up and coming bands, but we also love bringing the bands that have made it big and are willing to come back to a 600 cap venue, which, obviously there comes a time where you just can't fit them in. We had Skillet when probably Skillet was too big. We've done a bunch of shows that were pushing the limits. The last time Skillet came, it was Skillet, TFK, and Decipher Down.
What a lineup.
What a lineup, instant sellout, and we've had just so many really cool lineups of just, very diverse bands from, some of the cool bands in the early days, Morelos Forest and Starflyer 59 and Reliant K and Velour 100 and Plank Eye and all these old, BEC record bands and then so many of the hardcore bands too that we've had, and hearing hardcore bands break out into hardcore worship, basically feeling the Spirit of the Lord move inside the Murray Hill Theater with all this crazy mosh pit going on, and then they start worshiping and everybody just starts raising their hands to the Lord. It's just been some incredible experiences. How
does booking work?
Most of the booking we do through, at least it starts with email pretty much, and it's booking at mhtrocks.com, and MHT stands for Murray Hill Theater, and then it's ROCKS.com. So that's our email domain. We have our website at mhtrocks.com or murrayhilltheater.com, but booking at mhtrocks.com. Of course, if you go to murrayhilltheater.com or mhtrocks.com, there's a tab there on booking, and it'll have all the information on if you're a band and want to play when you're going to be in Jacksonville. Hit us up.
Awesome. Do you have any word for your fans who've been coming to Murray Hill for the last 30 years?
Oh my gosh, they're a blessing. And, we couldn't have stayed open if fans didn't keep supporting us. And it takes the local bands and the regional bands and the touring bands and the fans. So it's really, those fans that have been coming for 30 years. And now, we do have parents that are bringing their kids, second generation. We've had kids that are in bands that their parents were in bands. So that's fun. And in fact, we even have a third generation. Those people that have been coming for 30 years are just a blessing.
Any last word?
Check us out. Of course, if you're traveling through Florida, come visit. If you're a band, let us know. See if we can get you on stage. Once a week, we send out an email that says, here's who's coming up. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, those types of things. There is one thing. Let me add a little thing. One of the guys that works for Joy FM had heard me sharing from the stage and encouraged me to let them do a video recording of my story, because they do something that they call Joy Stories. And they did an interview, and they whittled that story down to a 6-minute video story. And if you were to Google Joy Story with my name, Tony Nasrallah, it'd probably pop up on YouTube. But it's out there. So if anybody wanted to see a pretty well done brief video testimony, it's kind of cool.
Y'all can go to the Solid Rock Radio blog page for this interview, and I'll have it there. This has been great. I want to thank you for openly sharing your story. It always moves me, so raw, yet it's so hopeful.
It is, and I hope that's what comes across, is that if it weren't for God, I'm confident if it weren't for God that I would have either jumped out that window, I would either be dead now, or I would have just, after the accident, there were times where the only way I could calm my nerves was hitting the bottle again, and I could have easily gone down a path of, I could be drunk in a gutter shaking my fist at God right now. And it wasn't my own willpower, it was the spirit of the living God inside of me. Nothing but the grace of God. I mean, it wasn't anything I was doing, because I was just literally ready to end it all, ready to just give up on everything.
I think I can speak for a lot of people. We're awfully glad you didn't give up. Your ministry is priceless. Thanks for the interview, and I hope to see you down there in Jacksonville in August at some point.
All right. Thanks so much. God bless.
You too.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. Stay tuned for more great music and check out my blog page on the Solid Rock Radio website for my guests' social media links. If you've missed any of my past interviews, you can find them uploaded to podcast.solidrockradio.org. Have a wonderful week, and let's be kind to one another.